And we're live once again. Welcome back, guys, to the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. I'm joined by Glenn Highcove. How are you doing, man, on this Friday evening?
Well, I had me a busy week, but yeah, I'm definitely ready. I'm excited. We had so much good feedback on our last show, and we hit another milestone with our show recently with subscribers. So it feels like things are just moving faster than ever. And like I think by the way, you know the show before this had our best reception ever,
Yeah.
by far. I mean, we literally did like four times the next highest, which was already pretty amazing. So yeah, this is going to be a heck of an episode tonight.
Definitely, man. So, as promised, guys, we are returning back to the Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon's case. So, without any further ado, this week we'll be talking about the theories. Now, I have done some extensive research for the last few days. I have my own theory that I suggest you stick around for, that I will present to you guys. Some of you guys who have been looking into this case might already find flaws in my theory, or maybe not, or maybe it actually will make sense because I didn't really find anyone talking about what I'm thinking at the back of my head, like how things actually worked out on in those first days of April in 2014 in the Pianista Trail in Boquete. Let's mention the fact that we messed up with the pronunciation of Boquete. We said Boquete, it's actually Boquete. So I'll just do the quick intro, and I think you have some points that you want to hit before we jump into the theories. So without wasting any time, let me just do
Yeah.
the intro. So I have, like, for the premise that we would usually do, I would have the question for everyone. So basically, where could the girls have factually ended up in between the time of the last photo, number 508, and the time of their first emergency call that same afternoon? So basically, the time span was just a little over 2.5 hours. So what could have potentially happened in those 2.5 hours? Now I have a whole thing that I will want to bring up to the audience at the end, uh, my line of like thinking and stuff like that. Before we do that, I think you have something you want to clarify before we jump into it, right?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, one of them was the like you said, the whole pronunciation of boquete, uh, and I should have known better. I took Spanish, and certainly, I guess that definitely made sense. So to the viewer who clarified that and pointed that out, you're definitely right. Thank you, for letting us know. And then the other thing that I think more than one of our listeners flagged was my statement about the continental divide being at the border, and that this happening at all near the border. So my fault again. I had not dug deep enough when I was doing it. It's funny because if I just looked at the map a little more closely, it would have been pretty obvious that the continental divide the continental divide actually does cross the border, but this whole case is not by the border at all. Um, I guess why I got off on that weird tangent was I was looking through. I was like, how did I end up saying that? Because it does have to do with the continental divide. So what the continental divide is it's basically it's sort of this long line that goes through North and South America and through Central America, obviously, between them. And it's in the case of this case, where the trail goes, it's a part where it basically divides kind of like one half of like where on one side you have the Pacific, and the other side you have essentially the Caribbean. And the whole point of this was you could go up and on a clear day when it's not cloudy and misty, you could actually see ocean on both sides of you. That makes sense. So on one, you could see kind of on both sides of the continent that you're on. If you're in Central America, it's one of the few times you can actually do that on the continental divide. In America, it's a different dividing line, or North America, I should say. But anyways, I made a lot of comments about it being on the border and, border areas being dangerous. And you look at it and you're like, oh, this is nowhere near the border with Costa Rica. Now, where Costa Rica is relevant is that some of the native peoples that we're going to talk about they do straddle these two countries, and it does look like this trail does potentially come near some of the, let's say, like internal dividing lines of like jurisdictions or states within Panama, like maybe county lines or something like that, or lines that demark some of these like almost like reservations for some of these native people. But yeah, I mean, it was a good point. I felt pretty embarrassed when I saw that. So we'll definitely own up to our mistakes in this show, and we never say we're perfect, but we definitely don't want to provide misinformation. So thank you to the user that pointed that out to us, and I think it was more than one. So from there, I think it's a good point to actually get into a little bit more about the people around in the area around the Pianista Trail, because I think it probably is relevant given the line of inquiry we're going to pursue tonight. What do you think?
Definitely, man. Definitely. Yeah, I think I just want to see. I look at the shared screen right now. I see the locals. Yeah, I mean, let's do it. Let's get through the locals, because actually, I think we both, at least I was pretty shocked of like the types of things that happen around the general vicinity and the general jungle areas of Panama, and I would say the surrounding countries as well. It sort of felt to me that things are a little underreported there. I mean, we have some crazy stories from, I think, more recent stories than Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon's disappearance, and then subsequential death. One of the stories happened actually earlier than that, so yeah, I mean, let's jump into it. Like, I was actually surprised of like the type of things that could go down in the jungle.
Yeah, and it's almost like a case of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I think one thing is if you haven't ever been to Central America or even Latin America, sometimes it's really easy to get kind of a stereotype of everybody being like maybe one ethnicity or one culture, and it's actually pretty fascinating if you go down. I mean, obviously, this is the case for almost any place that things are not uniform. But I think what is pretty interesting about Central America is that you go down there, and Central America really is the crossroads of Latin America. So you've had a lot of different migrations of peoples and kind of like intermixing, and it's pretty fascinating. I mean, that's for sure the case where my wife's from in Belize, but it's also the case in the place we're talking about today, Panama. So on one hand, you have kind of what you might think of as like the mainstream of Panama. So, Panamanian citizens that probably consider themselves to be sort of the mainstream culture there. In this case, let's talk about the town of Boquete. So the town of Boquete is, it's not a massive town. It's only about 19,000 people, and about 3,000 of those people are foreigners. And by foreigners, I mean people that are not from Panama originally. So that's pretty interesting, because that's actually a pretty high percentage. I mean, that's like what, 1 in 6 people are not actually from Panama. They've moved there from some other country. Well, why would they do that? Well, it turns out that Boquete is actually a pretty nice little town. It's got a really good reputation in some ways. I almost think of it as here in the United States, the town of Austin in Texas is known as being kind of different than the rest of Texas. It's known as kind of like a very artsy, music-friendly town. And I would say Boquete is the same way. It actually has the second biggest jazz festival in Panama, which I think is probably a mark of sophistication. It also has a very big tourist economy, so it's probably no surprise that the two protagonists of our tale ended up there, because it does have a big tourist draw. But the only other thing I thought it was interesting it's known for is for its excellent coffee. So that's pretty interesting. I guess it makes me almost jealous, makes me want to go down there and get some coffee. But
yeah,
because we're big coffee drinkers here. Anyways, I think that if from that point of view, it looks like it has a lot to offer you, and from that perspective, like, no wonder people decide to settle there. I mean, when you look at the pictures, I mean, if you had to live in Panama, it doesn't look like it's too shabby a place to live. I think I wouldn't almost mind living there, given what I just learned about it. Now, um, that's if that's the mainstream, then you have, of course, people that are maybe on the fringes of that society, or that are experiencing the society in a different way. So, what I mean by that is, to the north, you have people known as the
Nagobi, I believe
yeah,
Nagobi.
Nagobi,
Yeah.
sometimes called Nagabe. Probably really depends what part of Central America you're running into them in. But they sort of, like many indigenous people up and down, South America, Central America, and like Southern North America, like in Mexico. Um, a lot of times, indigenous people straddle national borders, right? So this is the case for this group of people. They live in sort of semi-autonomous regions, meaning they have some autonomy over themselves. I think that's probably similar, I would say, to how Native Americans are treated in the United States and Canada, where they're given, I think, because of the historical things that have happened to that group of people, as some form of redress, they're given some authority over themselves. Um, so probably not surprisingly, they're also socially very conservative. And what I mean by that is they're very much into, their own manners and customs. They are not they're not going to have the jazz festival there, right? They're not
Nah.
going to be into the cutting edge of cultural trends that you might see in, like, the United States, or even in maybe the more cosmopolitan parts of Latin America. They may be more superstitious. They may have very strong religious beliefs. And interestingly, they have a very wide spread of religious beliefs, from like Catholicism to things that are probably closer to maybe really ancient religions, like you might see in places like Africa, or other, less developed,
Yeah.
or exposed to, places that haven't been colonized as steadily. And they're also extremely impoverished. Of course, if you're not, part of the major economy, and they're largely living off of like an agricultural subsistence economy, and also making like little, crafts and things that you might sell to tourists, probably in Boquete. Um, they're extremely impoverished. That does not necessarily mean, though, that they are so desperate that they would do criminal acts. I think that was something that came up, was interesting. I think everybody kind of marveled at the fact that the backpack, with cash and valuable goods was turned in, and I think that goes to show you that
Yeah.
crime and poverty don't always go hand in hand. So it may be, this is interesting, but you'll see this in other cases, especially in that part of the world, that um, sometimes people, especially in these native peoples, they have very strong beliefs, not only about, like, I guess it makes sense, right? If you're super religious and you believe in a higher power, you might also believe that you might get punished by that higher power for doing something criminal. So this is going to be interesting balancing point and point of debate, I think, as we discuss this case, because just because most people feel like that doesn't mean everybody feels like that. And, just like in any society, there are people that deviate from that, or interpret their own rules as being more important, let's say, than other aspects of that. So I feel like that's a pretty good
Yeah, that's,
summary
I would
so
say,
far.
I
Yeah.
also am reading a little bit information here, is that labor is one abundant resource for the Nagobi people, although due to poor education and low human capital, including health and nutrition, the labor force is rather unskilled. And as a result, many men of these Nagobi tribes serve as migrant agricultural workers or leave the comarca. Basically, comarca is that governing body, like by state, that they are like allowed to do their own like government type of a situation. It's called like the comarca, and they leave these comarcas, I believe, to seek other types of informal jobs. So basically, yeah, it's a pretty rural native community of people. Now, I think we should get into what these people are actually, not necessarily these people, but like the things that happen in the jungle, like before we, I guess, go into the main theories. You have a few crazy stories. You want to share them with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because when I think about it, I almost think of like parallels with here in the United States in Appalachia. There's a movie called Deliverance, which is 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 infamous for a certain scene, but I think that the whole point of Deliverance is that you have a bunch of kind of city slickers that go into the woods to go do a raft trip, and in places like Appalachia, you have kind of almost similar, even though they're not. I mean, they've been there so long they almost might as well be Native Americans, but you have people that are geographically isolated, impoverished rural dwellers, and like I said, their only resource really is whatever kind of labor they can sell and whatever kind of maybe either legal or illegal commerce they can finagle out of the woods there. And then sometimes because it's so isolated, it's really easy for somebody to victimize you and for really nobody to find out about it, which was, the case in that movie Deliverance, and maybe the case in this case we're talking about today. So yeah, I mean, for instance, you've had some things where, sometimes religious sects turn up, and there were ones where like there was this one story where a mass grave was found right in the same area, and it contained the body of a pregnant woman and 6 children, and then coming out of this, 9 different indigenous people were being arrested. And the theories around this were that it may be that be people kind of punishing their own family because of their own kind of super religious or almost like cult-like beliefs. So people that take, you take any religion to an extreme, and when it branches off of the mainstream beliefs, and where you start justifying, let's say, things that, like thou shalt not kill, but then someone takes that and says, well, except, when it offends my extreme belief about my interpretation of this thing, like it may be, the theory here is that you may have people punishing sinners or strangers who bring bad fortune, including maybe, scantily clad Westerners not acting in ways that you think are in accordance with what your God
Dude,
thinks you should do.
Could I step in
Yeah.
here for 1 second, because I don't think you would have mentioned this fact. So basically, this mass grave that you just brought up was actually it happened pretty recently. I believe it was in 2020, so this year. I'm reading January 17th. I'm not really sure if it happened on January 17th, like the discovery happened there, but I think the update was on January 17th. Now, the other interesting fact that, because I think it's very important to link this mass grave of a pregnant woman and 6 children, because it literally happened in the same Panamanian district where Lisanne Froon and Kris Kremers went missing. So it happened in the same district. Obviously probably not the same jungle, I would say, but like definitely the same district. So that's the only thing I wanted to mention here, that in the same district of Panama, crazy stuff is happening, like on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because if you think about it psychologically, it could be really easy if you're isolated from the outside world. I mean, we've seen this in so many cases um, when it comes to like cult-like behavior. It's really easy to sort of lose your perspective, if that makes sense. So if everybody around you starts to believe the same extreme beliefs, and whether that's your family or a group of families or your town, it's easy to get kind of unmoored from what is like considered decent behavior or appropriate behavior by everybody else. And then I think your perspective, it's very easy to lose that perspective and start to do things. I mean, it becomes like almost a slippery slope
Yeah.
of like, well, this is now appropriate. So, because of that, it looks like it says here, I think in our research, we had some additional information that, for instance, with this case, police rescued a further 15 people who they thought were next in line for, a similar mass murder, according to the public prosecutor's office. So it's interesting because this is a country, Panama, actually something like 6% of their gross domestic product comes from tourism, which is considered quite high. So for this to even get out in the public, it was definitely a major problem. And one of the people arrested was the grandfather of some of the murdered children, which, I mean, I can't even wrap my head around that. But I think that shows you,
Wow.
yeah, the depth of the belief, right? And apparently, three of the villagers. Once again, this is like almost exactly like the kind of cult stories you would hear
Yeah.
from this, or like was it was it Jamestown was the one, the cult that happened. It was an American cult that went down to South America that had a big mass killing that was very similar to this, where, yeah, people, there are people that kind of wake up and they're like, oh wait, this doesn't seem right, and they have to like essentially escape it. And yeah, the area is so remote that helicopters had to be used to ferry um, the the injured people out to hospitals for treatment. So it kind of shows you, it gives you a different perspective on when things go bad, how bad things can get in this exact area. So, I mean,
Yeah.
certainly, I think you and I both both feel like this really affected our like compared to like episode 1 that we did, a couple months ago before we started doing this follow up. I think I had kind of been, I'll say I specifically had been very skeptical about, a lot of the rumors flying around this. But then when you look at this and you're like, oh no, there was a lot of crazy, unhinged kind of behavior going on out there. And, it's not, it could be super extreme or it could be cannibalism or something like that, right? But that's not necessarily what's going on. But the fact that no, there are like people that have actually killed other people in mass, like a mass murder or a bunch of serial murders that have happened, and not just because of one person, but essentially a cultist conspiracy.
Yeah.
Well, then that's a different story, isn't it?
Yeah, bro. Before we jump into I guess the theories surrounding Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon's disappearance, I also have one of the other cases that I found. I don't think you have it in your notes. I just want to quickly read an article just because I think it's really important for us to mention this fact that actually a man was sentenced to 12 years for a murder of a United States tourist in Panama. So basically an 18-year-old man, so a very young man, was sentenced to just 12 years in prison for the robbery, rape, and murder of a tourist from the United States. We have Jonette, a 23-year-old Columbia University graduate from Scarsdale, New York, was actually found strangled on a hiking trail on Bastimentos Island on February 5th, 2017, 3 days after she went missing while on vacation in the Caribbean archipelago. Her killer, who was a minor at the time, actually was captured 8 months later in Cayo de Agua, I believe. So basically Bocos del Toro, the place where the girls first arrived, is a popular tourist area and province of Panama that is made up of islands of the Caribbean coast. The main island, Isla Colon, is home to the capital Bocas town, a central hub with restaurants, shops, and nightlife, pretty much. So, I'm not gonna get into the other details here. This case is used by a lot of people who definitely believe that foul play was involved in the disappearance of the two main protagonists that we're going to be talking about today. And yeah, I don't think we ever mentioned this particular incident, but I think it's really important to mention that tourists do end up getting killed by the locals sometimes, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, right. So I think we should be jumping into the theories now. I have a outline of like certain theories, and as we have talked about before recording this show, I actually want to go through them, and I will ask for your input here and there. So why don't we just do it right now, right, man?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, bro. So first of all, I have the accident theory, right? So basically the thing that we sort of were leaning towards on our first episode, which was, I believe, episode 56 back in the day. So I have the pros and cons of every theory, so let's jump to the pros, the cons, and then I will sort of ask for your input here and there. So basically, the pros for the accident theory would be that most credible experts are actually stating that this was most likely an accident. We have the Panamanian authorities, which I will be going back to a little bit. Because they were shady in my opinion, as well as the Netherlands authorities of all people. Like, you would think that the Dutch authorities would be like, yo, let's investigate this a little bit more thoroughly, like some shady stuff is happening, but nope, they also think that this was an accident. So credible experts are leaning towards that this was actually an accident. Also, I have a question here and answer. So basically, how likely is it to survive in the jungle for 11 days? Because that's when the last phone activity was recorded, and we would sort of have to lean towards that. One of the girls was still using the phone on day 11th. Now, if it's fairly likely to survive in the jungle for 11 days, then, the accident theory would actually gain strength. Also have the foot from Lisanne showed to have been broken in many places. So basically, multiple fractures of the basically the metatarsial, the long bones that connect the ankle to the
metatarsal, I think.
Oh yeah, man. I'm not like I'm not a bone expert, obviously.
You know what it was? I broke a broke a bone in my hand when I was a teenager, and ever since then I started to learn some of those bone names.
Okay. So basically, this fracture in this bone is actually consistent with a fall from great height. Investigators actually stated that. And the last point that would sort of be a pro for the accident theory is that the separation of the remains could be explained. Basically, if Kris had died sometime after her phone stopped working, because on day 6, Kris's iPhone is already being used with incorrect pin codes and things like that. That would sort of indicate that, Lisanne is using the phone, which I don't really believe. I will get into this later on the show. You could sort of explain that if Kris has died, Lisanne just sort of tried to push on in the jungle, and she probably just left Kris's body there, and then Lisanne later on died somewhere in the jungle because she couldn't make it out of there alive. Basically, one more thing that I want to mention for the people that are literally listening to us for the first time ever, we have talked about the details on our previous episode number 70, so that's why we're not returning to the details, because we're just trying to, do the theories here. I'll do the cons for this accident theory, and then I will ask for your input regarding this theory. So basically, the first con that would sort of disprove this theory is that it's actually supposedly really hard to get lost in this trail. This trail is actually very active. A user on Scarlett's blog, that really extensive blog, Scarlett is actually a real nice person. I had like a chat with her, like a small back and forth with messages recently. This blog actually states that basically a user in this blog states that on 2012 he went on a trail and actually encountered around 100 people, and he also states that it's unlikely that anyone goes off track because the terrain becomes very difficult to traverse immediately. The foot actually seemed to be cut off with precision, and that's actually hard to do by accident. It would correlate more with a cut by a blade. The guide stated that it's not unusual for tourists to get lost in the Pianista Trail, however, they would always find them. And also, missing picture 509. Why would the girls take time to delete pictures, you know what I'm saying? Like, why are they even thinking about, oh, let's delete 509, I don't look nice in this picture or something like that? That just doesn't make any sense if you're, you know what I'm saying, like if you're lost in the jungle and then you sort of take another 90 random pictures, and then you don't think about deleting those pictures, but for some reason you thought that it's a good idea to delete 509. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, 509 sort of indicates that, someone is trying to protect their identity. That's why the picture is deleted. Like all of this will play a part in my last big theory that I have for the ending of the show. So yeah, your input on the accident theory, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because I was leaning towards that so hard. The very first episode, this is our third episode on the topic, but the very first one we did a couple months ago, before we got all the user feedback and additional information. Yeah, I thought, just it seemed like the simplest explanation. The fact that their bodies had turned up, that, we had the backpack, though, I guess didn't pay enough attention to what pristine condition that it was in. But yeah, I mean, especially the one thing that does stick out at you is like that weird erasure of that photo that apparently can only be done with a computer because of the way the photos are stored. The one thing, the question I have coming out of this, which I don't have an answer for, but I think, kind of begs better investigation, is apparently it's pretty hard to actually delete a file. So, you see this all the time when investigators grab somebody's hard drive for evidence. There's actually special tools you have to use to deep delete a photo. And I always wonder, if their family really pushed hard enough, or if the Netherlands authorities pushed hard enough, could you actually get a look at that memory card and actually see what that supposedly deleted photo is? Because what happens is, just the technical side of it is, if you just kind of do the easy delete, all that's doing is it just kind of, I think it just turns a little flag in the file. Just kind of tells your computer, oh, you can write over this file now. But like a lot of times, unless you're really doing a lot of, you're using, you're kind of filling up and kind of writing and rewriting and using that thing for a long time, it doesn't actually necessarily get written over, which is how, like the police can go look at a hard drive and find these supposed, erased files that aren't really gone. So yeah, from my perspective, that's what I'd like to see. Is I would really like to see what that file is and whether that thing really was erased. But yeah, I mean, I think for all the reasons you gave, you made a really compelling case that the accident theory, given what we've talked about last episode and so far this episode, doesn't really hold water.
Right. Let's move to the next theory, that it would be like the natives, some sort of a native involvement in their disappearance. The pros would be that actually the attempts to access the phones with an incorrect PIN code after day 6 could have been done by a third party, maybe a native who was just like, trying to figure out how it all works. One of the photos made on day 8 clearly depicts Kris's hair. Her face is not shown. She may be dead at that point, and could have been dead since day 6 when the incorrect pins have started to be entered in her iPhone. Same goes for Lisanne. She could be dead, but they just didn't take a picture of her. Both of them could be dead, and a third party would be taking those pictures on day 8 during the early morning hours. The backpack was clearly kept in a dry place, and the contents were neatly folded. My bad. So why would the girls neatly pack their stuff? Also, why would a murderer leave this backpack and not take the valuables? This is a con, I think. Why would the impoverished local natives, not take the money, the 80 something bucks lying in there? It will all make sense when I explain my general theory for what happened. We're still at the pros for the natives theory. Kris's pelvic bone was completely covered in phosphate, so that's potential bleaching right there. And could it be part of some ritual? That's what I have here. Would any animal swallow these bones, like a pelvic bone, and then poop it out pretty much? Because some people state that the phosphate on the bones sort of appears when an animal swallows the bone, and then sort of it comes out the other end and it already has phosphate on it. But like a pelvic bone, I don't see it happening. We have Lisanne's foot still having some skin attached to it while Kris was completely clean. A very odd difference indeed in the decomposition of the remains of both girls, which would sort of indicate that Lisanne could have been potentially left alive for a longer period of time. That's why her bones started decompose later on. I don't believe this was the case. I will sort of explain why, but the next point is that pretty much the woman who found the backpack stated it was not there just one day before her discovery of the backpack, so it clearly insinuates that someone left it there, and it could not have been the girls, because surely they would have been rescued if they just left it. Plus, they were dead at that point. Like, the backpack was discovered months into their disappearance. Also, maybe a native or multiple natives actually scared them on purpose, and they then ran deep into the jungle and got lost that way. I don't believe that's the case, but it's something to think about. Also, we have some commenters on our YouTube channel stated that the native woman brought the backpack just to claim the $30,000 reward. This would sort of explain why the money was still in the backpack, because you would leave $83 if you have the potential to get $30,000, so that's how you explain like the valuables there. This actually is something that I sort of believe happened. More on that later on. And now the cons for the native theory, well, I only have a few of them. The first would be that basically the question, why were the valuables still in the backpack? But obviously I sort of believe that the intention was to bring the backpack so that you could turn it in for 30 G's that the family of these girls had offered. Also, the natives are said to be very nice people. Most of them would not want to kill innocent tourists, which I do agree. Most of them would not want to kill innocent tourists, but we just gave a whole bunch of examples of things going really bad for tourists. So yeah, man, your general reaction for the natives theory?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I thought of was, as far as like the backpack and them not taking it. I mean, I mean, there's lots of people that are superstitious about taking stuff from a dead person. You know what I mean? Like I think I've seen it in a movie before, like dead man's hat, dead man's gun. So maybe just from that perspective, you could feel like the something from a dead person was tainted. Whether or not you killed them, or you just knew who killed them, or whatever it was. I mean, from that perspective, that makes sense for me. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, I mean, it's interesting because you would think. Sometimes I feel like if you're ignorant, and I don't mean ignorant in a pejorative sense, right? Like, I mean ignorant like you just don't know something. So what I've kind of noticed and experienced, and you see it even here in America with small towns, where sometimes people in small towns, it's like two extremes, right? Sometimes people in small towns are super polite, and then sometimes people in small towns are super like rude and arrogant with outsiders because they don't really understand maybe the bigger world that's out there. And I mean, like I said, I don't mean that just for the people that we're talking about here. That's the case for anybody that comes from kind of a smaller environment, is that sometimes they don't really understand like the hand of God that's going to come smack them down. And or that higher power. I'll give you an example. I always think of like the Somali terrorists that the hijackers that the Captain Phillips thing that happened.
Yeah.
Like, their perspective, all they kind of knew was like the world they were coming from, and that the kind of action and reaction, and frankly they'd been very successful in hijacking ships and getting people to pay ransoms. They didn't realize the reason why nobody had hijacked an American ship, an American flagship, was that literally a SEAL team was FedExed from the United States overnight to the other side of the world. Navy SEALs dropped out of an airplane, and 24 hours later they were all dead.
Damn.
That wasn't even on their radar. Who would think? That sounds like something out of a movie, right? But it really happened. I mean, it was a movie also later, but it really happened. And like that was not anything that was even in their universe before that could ever happen. So from that same perspective, I always think like, especially if you knew of people that have been killed and sort of no one ever came to find out what happened to them, and they're like, well, their family doesn't live here. What are they going to do? Come all the way across the ocean and investigate this? Nah, no one will know. It's like someone like that doesn't necessarily know about all the different like DNA evidence and things you could use to track down. But let's face it, like maybe they were right? Because we still don't really know what happened so far. So
Exactly. Exactly. The next theory would actually be a very compelling theory for me personally, that one of the local guides actually was involved, basically the one who found the shorts. So I have the pros for this theory is that a local guide called Loriano Waherano, another guide called Angel, aka Angel Palacios, found the jean shorts. So basically, at least 8 walking hours away from Boquete and several kilometers away from where the Froon's backpack had been discovered. So basically, this is pretty odd because it's a really peculiar place to find a piece of clothing, because you had like police, dogs sniffing around trying to search for like any sort of remains, any sort of like clothing to bring them closer to the remains or anything like that. No one could do that, but these random guides did. But the guides actually had not been as random as everyone sort of initially believed, because one of these guides who actually found the remains offered them a tour less than 24 hours before their disappearance. That would include an overnight stay at his shack, which is pretty creepy. And the girls, for unknown reasons, had denied this offer. I think it's a pretty normal thing to deny that type of an offer when you're like a female and things like that. The same guide is said to be very suspicious, and actually most of the local guides suspect him of being involved in the 2 girls' disappearance. The guides themselves, basically the ones who found the shorts, because I believe there were 2 of them, claimed they found the shorts floating in the river, but the 6 local Nagobi members who helped them out, because they were getting help from Nagobi people on this search for some apparent reason. These 6 local Nagobi members said that the shorts were actually found on ground, so not in a river. So this could sort of indicate that the guides may have used the river scenario just to sort of prove their innocence. Oh, we just found the shorts on the river, so they just float past us. We didn't find them on a ground location or things like that. We just sort of were walking and some shorts were floating around. That's how we noticed it, because if you found a piece of if you found shorts in a really hard place to find shorts, everyone's gonna be raising suspicion. Like, how do you know about this location of these shorts? How did you manage to find that? Like, police was out here for like months doing their thing, you know what I'm saying? They couldn't find nothing. Now you find the shorts under some bush in the middle of nowhere. Like, how does that even work? Now the Dutch police estimated that the distance between the jean shorts and the backpack was no less than 18 hours of walking distance, which is really baffling. Also, they managed to find the shorts so far away from the backpack. Maybe they knew where the shorts were beforehand, and also they found the remains, but the dogs couldn't. How does that work? So that's just a little sub note I have there. And I have the cons for this theory is that why would you potentially implicate yourself by finding the shorts? That doesn't really make sense. Like, if you killed someone and you know where the shorts are, first of all, you're gonna destroy the shorts. You're not gonna few months after the fact bring them out, unless you're trying to get those $30,000, which I will talk about shortly. And yeah, the last point is that there was a $30,000 reward. and apparently the guides didn't claim that reward or something along those lines. So I don't know, man, your reaction to the guide theory?
I mean, yeah, it's funny. You make a good point that like the river suddenly becomes like this easy excuse, because the river, rivers are notoriously unpredictable, and then like it becomes like this kind of catch-all excuse for like, oh yeah, the river did it, that river stuff's always turning up, which is like not untrue, but still it's pretty suspicious. It says, with the 30K reward, I don't know, maybe they got cold feet. Maybe they did the same kind of game theory logic that we're doing right now, where we're like, well, it implicates you. Maybe they started to go through with it. Here's the other thing. Maybe they just felt guilty, because that's one of the things. I was reading the source book for the movie The Irishman. The source book's called I Heard You Paint Houses. And the guy that wrote the book, when he was working in police detective work, his partner told him, look, like almost everybody wants to confess. So that's something to think about, is, that I think
real?
that psychology. Yeah. That just, even like hardened hitmen and stuff. There was this one example, actually, one of the funny, I hate to laugh, but one of the funny ones was the guy in the book, The Irishman. He said at one point someone else did a murder, and the cops were trying to pin it on him because they knew he'd done so many other things, and and they kept bringing in people to question them and say, hey, I heard Frank did it, and finally the guy says, I did it. He was like insulted that they didn't think that he could do it.
Oh, okay.
And he actually like admitted it. He's like, you dummies, why couldn't I have done it? And he did do it.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of funny, because it was like, sometimes it's that, like pride, and sometimes it's like you want to get it out. Like killing somebody is not, for most people, is not some easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
even
Yeah.
for like, yeah, you know what I mean? So it's, I think it's such an unnatural act that at some point people really do want to like, kind of unburden themselves. So that was like one of the lessons from that book that I thought was interesting, was it was actually reliable, that if you could kind of get somebody in the right mood, and get them talking to you, pretty soon it was going to come out. So, maybe that was just part of it. Maybe kind of the halfway point of confessing was just to say like, hey, well, maybe they felt better if like at least this thing turns up, right? If like, at least the evidence turns up, and the bodies turn up, and the families get some now, because now their families, it's not like Jimmy Hoffa's family in that movie, where like they still don't know what happened to him, right? Like at least the families know, they're not still looking for them, like, oh, our missing daughters are out there somewhere, like some of the other cases we've done where we never had a body turn up, and they've had to rule people dead in absentia. Like in this case, yeah, we've got bones from them. Like we know they're probably dead.
Yeah. Right. Let's get into the serial killer theory, and only have a few left before I present my general theory on this whole case. The serial killer theory sort of would be the same thing as the locals or the natives, you would say, but a serial killer in a way that, it was planned, it was a kidnap, someone was like scoping them out for a few days, they knew that they were going on this trail, like by themselves, without a guide, like that sort of theory. So basically I have the pros is that two young European girls on their own in the middle of a jungle trail would be a nice prey for a sinister person, which is true. A piece of skin from Lisanne's leg was found 5 months after the girls disappeared, and it was actually about 4/5 intact and in an early stage of decomposition, which would sort of play into the whole I kidnapped Lisanne and Kris. I didn't like Kris or something like that. I just kill Kris, then I like sort of have Lisanne in my possession. I do what I want with her, then I kill her later on. That's why the remains are found in different locations. That's why the bone decomposition rates are actually different as well. I mean, it makes some sense. I don't personally believe that was the case. I will explain all of my reasoning later on. Also, some forensic specialists think that perhaps a third party stored Lisanne's bones and soft tissue somewhere else in a cool and protected place and then placed them later on in the jungle. Doesn't make much sense to me. I don't know who these forensic specialists are, but I am leaning towards like a foul play theory, but not this type of foul play theory. We also have now, dude, I noticed that I haven't shared you the screen, but I think you should see it right now. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but you should see a screen right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, you see this picture right here. So basically, this is just one of the commenters on our YouTube channel on episode number 56. So I just have to mention the fact that in this picture, where this is his comment, in this picture where Kris seems to be handcuffed close to Kris' left leg, in the bottom there is a man with a hat, a blanket over his shoulders, and a rifle between his hands. Close to the man at his right, there are one or two men more, so it was not written in perfect English. So basically, this person is insinuating that from this picture we could see like at least a couple people like with guns, and Kris is handcuffed. I mean, I personally don't buy it. I don't know, man. You could give your reaction at the end. And the cons for this theory, like the general serial killer theory, not this picture theory. Like this picture is more of a like a let's say it's a funny theory that I just wanted to put in here. Why were they using phones? Surely no kidnapper would allow the girls to make emergency phone calls for multiple days. That's exactly why I don't believe this was planned out. I will explain my reasoning at the end. The fact that they seem to stay alive at least for 5 days makes me think that this was not some pre-planned kill. And we have Kathy Risch, some American crime writer, forensic anthropologist, and academic. She is actually the main writer of the TV show Bones, which we did have here in Lithuania. I know about the show, it's pretty famous, I assume. She states that the difference in remain decomposition is actually explainable because remains decompose at different rates in different areas. Different microbiological environments make the remains decompose at different rates, which I do believe is true. I definitely think that she is right. Like, she's an expert. And yeah, if you have one set of remains in one place in the jungle and another set of remains in a whole nother different area of the jungle with like different microbiological stuff happening there, I'm sure that the bones will actually decompose at different rates. So that's what I have on the serial killer / kidnapper pre-planned kill theory. Your general thoughts on that theory, man?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. There's like a whole mystery around how bodies decompose, and I don't know if our listeners know this, but the I think it's the FBI actually has like it's kind of a weird to describe it, but they have kind of like a garden of dead bodies. So they'll take bodies that have been donated to science, and like they have those same questions because like you might have a theory about what happens to a body or bones in different kinds of weather and different kinds of decomposition, and whether it's buried 1 feet or 2 feet or 10 feet down. But until you actually do the experiment, you don't know, right? So and then you'll find things like maybe you will find that like this bone, because like bones are not all uniform, right? Like your hip bone is definitely different than like your femur, which is different than your metatarsal or metacarpal. All those things are gonna differ, and the weather's gonna change it. So yeah, that makes sense to me. As far as this photo goes,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I just like here comes Glenn with the yeah. This is one of the ones I gotta push back, and I'm like, I don't know. It looks awkward. It is an awkward photo. Like, it kind of. I mean, if you were gonna take a really conventional view of this thing, it kind of looks like they just started getting really tired and dehydrated as this hike went on, and like they stopped trying. we're like the beginning of the photo thing. They're all smiling and happy, and everything looks like an Instagram photo, without the filter. And then by the time they get here, they're like, just I don't know. She's doing something. She's up the, like she can't even like get the energy to like go up the trail to like frame it right. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't. I guess my question is like, if you were some dude in a hat with a rifle, why would you get captured in the shot?
Exactly.
Right. This is like
Exactly. Why would you do that? Now, this was like an anecdotal piece of evidence. I want to quickly move through the last two theories. They're really small, and for one, I only have like the pros. But it doesn't mean that it happened. Basically, the taxi driver, I thought that he was pretty suspicious, like the guy who drove them to the trail on April 1st. Basically, the driver stated to police that he picked them up at around like 1:30 p.m. and drove them off at the start of the Pianista Trail around 15 minutes later, so 1:45 p.m. Now, I do have some information. This taxi driver has died under suspicious circumstances, aged 34, 1 year later, when he was found floating in a shallow pool of water during his work hours. I believe something along like his son also died or something like that. I don't know, he died at 34. How old his son could have been, something like that. So basically, I don't know if anyone has more information on the taxi driver. He doesn't really play a part in my general theory, so I just want to move past him. He's like a honorable mention at this point. And then also I have the animals, which I only have like the cons, like the against this theory. So I have that jaguars. So basically, I'll be talking about how the animals probably were not involved because the jaguars are not a big threat to humans anymore in that vicinity because there's a large amount of capybaras to eat. You want to mention something? Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I gotta jump in on this one. So, yeah, unfortunately, I'll have to challenge this one because I have a family connection.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yep. So, jaguars are actually, I think they're, oh, I might be wrong. I think they're either the largest or one of the largest, um, of the great cats. The predatory cats, and they're brutal. So, my wife's family, one of her relatives, close relatives, they have a farm, and out there in the by the lagoon in Belize, one of the main lagoons, and they've had this happen a couple times where jaguars have come and
Whoa.
started to kill their livestock, and no joke, I have pictures. I'll have to find out if I can share them sometime. I have pictures of where they had set a trap in a cage, and they caught the jaguar in a cage, and they were trying to do the right thing, right? So you're probably like me, Aloy. A lot of our listeners are like, it's not the jaguar's fault, right? The jaguar's just a wild animal, but like for sure it was out there, and it was out there killing, despite all the tapirs and other capybaras and all that stuff running around. It was eating their sheep, and their goats and things like that. So, and their cows. So it had to go. So they captured it in a cage, and they let it out at they gave it to a reserve, like a place that kept them safe. And you know what happened, dude? It killed somebody on the reserve.
Mm.
Yeah, it actually killed. It actually ended up being like killing a
Okay.
human being.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not saying they got killed by a jaguar. I'm just
But
saying it does happen.
I will say that one of the cons actually sort of is actually a stronger con in this animal theory than the population of capybaras being of a subsequent amount for them to sort of feed on them and not on humans. Is that I will agree that hungry jaguars would attack humans if they're really hungry, but actually the bones, neither of Lisanne's nor Kris' bones actually indicate any sort of animal activity. No scratches, scratches, no nothing. We do know that only a small amount of the bones were found, but like I would sort of assume that, if we would be going by the general theory that they sort of ate the bones, and like one of the bones, like the pelvic bones, was then eaten and then pooped out by like the jaguar or whatever. Like it would have like bite marks, scratch marks. The jaguar wouldn't just
Crush,
like,
crush marks.
yeah,
Yeah,
but there was nothing.
unless they just yeah. I mean, that's the one thing I don't know is how much they even mess around with carrion, because some animals, if it's not fresh, like they don't even want it, and then some like bear, like the opposite, where bears will actually bury stuff so it rots and ferments, and they actually like
Yeah,
cheese, and they like it better. So yeah, I don't know. It isn't a jaguar doesn't seem to me to be like a scavenger kind of animal.
yeah,
It seems to me to be more like a mountain lion, where it likes to kill its stuff fresh.
yeah. Okay, so basically for the last pieces here, I have the Panamanian government cover-up, sort of a theory slash explanation, and then we'll jump to the user theories, and then I think after that I'll present to everyone my general theory, and that's when we'll be wrapping up. So the Panamanian government cover-up. So basically I will now sort of present the official story of the government of what happened. So according to officials, the girls got lost and perished due to the elements or during a fall. So basically Kris fell first, Lisanne tended to her, then photographed her remains in the dark and moved on alone. So that would be on day 8. Then she also fell, broke her ankle and foot, perhaps fell into the river and died too, or they may both have fallen and drowned, or died from injury or infection. Maybe poisonous animals may have killed them. Panama has wild animals like the puma, the panther, the jaguar. They may also have died from thirst, hunger, exertion of the elements. People assumed this. The girls were very lightly dressed, so they may have suffered from hypothermia as well. So the Panamanian government is sort of pushing heavy the accident theory, which makes sense. Like if 6 or like 8% of the GDP of your entire country comes from tourists, you don't want these stories to like sort of be out there, I'm saying, without explanation. So now I will say that the Panamanian government story doesn't explain the missing picture 509, what the girls just sort of decided to delete that picture because it didn't look good, but then Lisanne was taking pictures of Kris all over the place. I don't know how that works out. Full autopsy reports were never released by the government. That includes the Kris's bones phosphate situation, which is not explained at all by the government and things like that. Also, the Panamanian government sort of they definitely have intentions to push this type of a theory, and they would definitely have intentions to cover up a killing type of a theory because they want those tourists to keep coming there. So that's just basically the general story what the government is saying, and I will sort of try to make my case that it was not what actually happened. Before I do that, I don't know, man, you want to jump into the user theories? We have Romaine. I just want to thank Romaine once again. Basically some of the footage being shown on this podcast on our YouTube channel here, or the Solvable Mysteries Podcast on YouTube, is from Romaine. He's a really cool at this point contributor to the case. So I think you will want to mention the lengthy email he sent us with this really interesting information that was not talked about anywhere. Honestly, like when he sent me this email, like this one detail was really interesting. I think we have to share it with our audience, and just the general comment reaction of episode number 56. So you want to take it over a little bit?
Yeah, I mean we are so lucky to have listeners and viewers like Romaine, and people that honestly contribute a lot to our show, whether it's research or, theories or, in this case, a lot of lake work, and also sometimes even like assets and videos that they share with us. So Romain, I think one of the things he helped us with this show a lot was just to do some sanity checking on the photos. Like, just because, like the clock on a camera, or even a cell phone camera, where the mobile phone in theory is communicating with the towers down there and getting its dates off of that. But like, I don't know that that's true, like universally. Like when I went to Belize, I don't know that I let my phone talk to the system down there. So I think I had to manually set the clock, etc. So, it is worth like checking the assumptions. So one of the things that Romain dug up for us was, and I think we will be sharing some of the photo assets from this, was, there was an analysis that was done where, depending on, I want to give you kind of the compressed version because it gets pretty complicated, but tell me if this makes sense. Depending where you are in the world and what time of the year it is and what time of the day it is, the shadows that the objects around you cast are going to look a certain way. Does that make sense? So when the sun is really close to the horizon, right? Yeah, I mean, the sun comes up, sun rises in the east, it sets in the west, right? So from that, like early in the morning and late at night, you're going to have long shadows. At like high noon, you're going to have short shadows. But even then, the shadows are going to lean a certain direction. And like, yeah, it really matters. Like during summer, when the side of the earth you were on is tilted a little more prominently towards the sun, that sun's going to be in a different part of the sky than like the middle of winter, when it's going to be almost like polar opposite. It's going to be significantly shifted down. Like I know that's one of the things that annoys me about October is it'll be hot, but the sun is like way down in the sky. It just feels weird, It feels like summer, but the sun's like in your friggin' face.
Yeah.
So what happened was somebody did a whole analysis, and they said they did kind of that trigonometry calculation. And they're like, look, based on the way the shadows are moving and what direction we know the camera was pointing, and what direction we know the sun was at this time of the year, and just using Google Earth. And there's even software you can use, by the way, for photography. I found out this last year, where you can do that same calculation. If there's some place you're looking to take a picture of, before you even go there, you can plug in the time and the year, and you can actually, I think it taps into Google Earth, and you can actually preview what it's going to look like with the shadow. Yeah, it's awesome. It's like it's super saves you a bunch of time, right? Because then it's like you don't go down there. It's friggin' awesome. I've used it for a couple different trips where you're like, oh yeah, before I even go mess with that, let's go check it out. So so like someone did kind of the harder version of this.
Could I just stop you for 1 second, because there's basically here on the visuals we are looking at like the screenshots from that really cool email that Romain sent us. I just want to make this. I thought that this little detail was like some Sherlock Holmes type of a thing. Like, this is some crazy crap right here. Look at this, man. Right now we are looking at like the screenshot from one of the pictures that was sent to us by Romain. And look, you see like how they know that this was the Lisanne's location. I know that probably not that it's probably pretty hard to see, but like you can see like a little point in this map that says Lisanne, right? Do you see it? Yeah, so basically I'm just gonna bring my mouse out a little bit. Like, you see this little like stream, like there's a stream going like in this direction, right? So basically this person, whoever was like doing the research, they noticed that basically Lisanne was, she was taking a picture from like next to this little stream right here, and they actually managed to find out that this stream right here is the actual stream, which I thought this is some next level stuff, man. Like, you notice that, like you probably should work like at FBA or FBI or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's amazing. So, I mean, that was really like what someone did a big favor for us here, because, or probably not just us, obviously everybody that was interested in this case, because they went and they did this analysis, and what it really did show was that, a lot of it was able to, this person was able to prove that, hey, look, like it does look like the timestamp on the photos is correct. And someone might say, well, that was a lot of like analysis for nothing, but it's not for nothing. I mean, it's really worth questioning those assumptions. There's so much with this whole case that doesn't really seem to be on the up and up, that I mean, you wouldn't put it past somebody to get the times right. And it's crucial to get these times right, because it does, in some cases, it might exonerate somebody from guilt, right? From suspicion. So if they were in they were at the trailhead at a certain time, that means that a certain other people that have alibis like no longer become immediate like suspects, right? Does that make
Exactly.
sense?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, just to summarize what they found in my words, I guess, basically, this person who, this was a French blog that Romain found. I know he might be a fan of that blog as well. Basically, they just found out that the picture, like, it correlated the shadow length of like objects nearby Lisanne on that picture correlated with the fact that, yep, it did seem that the cameras were showing the correct times. And I sort of think that this particular detail disproves a whole bunch of that photoshopped, like Lisanne was supposedly photoshopped in some areas. Like, I don't think anyone like took the time to photoshop Lisanne and sort of like make place the camera for discovery, and then people are now looking at photoshopped pictures of Lisanne. Like, what's the reason for that? You know what I'm saying? Unless this like some Joker type of a villain doing this, because it doesn't make any sense. So I think that was sort of the thing. I think a lot of the users also had like someone mentioned something about like human organ smugglers, something about a devious stalker guide, which I will get into. Panamanian corruption that I sort of talked a little bit about. We have something about Osman Valenzuela and Jose Manuel Murgas, local alleged gang members. You have some. Yeah.
Yes. So I'll go into that, because I mean, I found it compelling. It's just what this hinges off of is there were a couple of photos with these guys, and these are two people that died sort of a little bit suspiciously, where one person drowned and then another person died in an accident. And what the theories around, I don't think it's a bad theory. I mean, I think there's some credit to it, but I think there were two different pictures. And one picture, I think maybe we'll probably dig it up and show it. We'll be showing it when for the visuals for this, is that one of the pictures had both of them, they were buddies, hanging out with what looks like a couple of Western girls, a couple of girls from Europe, and the girls actually do, girls, young ladies, women. I don't want to be insensitive. It does look like it could plausibly be, Kris and Lisanne, but sort of the problem is there's two photos. So one photo is this photo, and then the other photo that everyone always uses is the two guys with two women again, and they always say, "Oh, case closed. That's them again." And to me, it's a little bit comical, because once again, I feel like that's where people start projecting into something where it's like, you know what? To me, actually, that photo that everyone's so into is like the opposite. Where to me, the two young ladies in that photo definitely do not look like them. Look like two totally other people, and that's where unfortunately, you can't.
Right.
You know what I mean? It starts to fall apart, and then you sort of lose credibility around your theory. Like, yeah, one was good, and then one wasn't good, and if you try to like force one of them for the other, it doesn't work. So
Right,
yeah.
right. That's pretty cool. So basically, I think it's now the point where I want to present my theory that I sort of like. I'm leaning towards this thing, but before we do that, I think we have to sort of give our reaction before that last theory. So I see you have like a little point here that you want to mention before I sort of take over for the last part.
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess I guess the one thing that I kind of wondered, and I think you've covered, you've addressed it a bit, but I think you're about to kind of nail it home is, what this came up in some other cases too, where someone turned up dead and it triggered a whole lot of other suspicion. What if you're a murderer? Why let the body ever be found? Like, especially someplace where the ground is soft, where things rot pretty easily because everything's so humid, and where you might have a pretty good case of just a body just completely, decomposing in a lot of ways, or you could also just destroy the body. Why wouldn't you just, if you were a murderer, why wouldn't you just bury them as deep as you could, someplace far away from a river or anywhere else where it could ever get washed up? Why wouldn't you just destroy the evidence?
That's actually a really good point, man. That's one of the things that sort of uh that's one of the big cons to my theory, but I sort of also have an explanation, so I will start off that I personally believe that it was foul play, but let's bring it back a little bit. Let's say it was not foul play. So if it was an accident, the only explanation have here is that the girls had to split up on day 8 because the nighttime pictures showed Chris's hair from an angle that only someone else would have taken the picture, so that probably would be Lisanne, because I don't believe Kris could use that power shot Canon camera, lift it above her head and then take a picture. I believe she may have been dead at that point, actually, and then Lisanne probably splits up with her. That's why the remains were found in different locations. The difference in decomposition has been explained by experts, which I do believe that the decomposition, the different rates of decomposition could be explained. I sort of believe that that just because different microbiological environments have different rates of remain decomposition. It's apparently natural for bones to deteriorate differently in different locations as well. So that's how I would see the accident playing out, but I don't think it was an accident. I think it was foul play. I will begin by talking about the backpack. It was clearly not last left by Lisanne or Kris before it was found. It was dry. Everything seemed to work. Stuff was neatly folded. Why would one of the girls just leave it there? You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you leave it there? Somewhere where, like the natives hanged around. Like, you would surely be discovered. The backpack was turned into by a native woman. So natives are poor. So basically 30 racks in reward money would pretty much make you into, I have here Rick Ross of the natives, pretty much. The fact that it was unusual for tourists to actually not get discovered is actually very odd, because almost all of the tourists are found alive. The missing picture 509, why would the girls be thinking about deleting this picture? Like, what? I talked a lot about this. So yeah, let's jump into my theory. Let's jump into how like everything sort of plays out in my head at this point. And if this theory has like a big hole in it that sort of disproves everything here, then just leave that in the comment section. So yeah, so this is what I guess we've all been waiting for, my theory. So basically the theory goes that the girls actually did get lost or got injured, hence the emergency call attempts. Therefore, I exclude the serial killer / kidnapper, pre-planned kill theory, animals, the taxi drivers, everything like that. I discredit those, and that actually leaves us with the natives or the guides. Basically, remember that shady guide that all of the other guides think that he was involved, because he offered them like a really suspicious tour less than 24 hours before they went missing. I'm talking about that guide and the natives. The natives are also sort of in play here. So basically, I don't think that they were immediately kidnapped. A lot of people that dig into this case believe that they were immediately kidnapped, like on day one. I don't think that was the case, because no kidnapper would allow them to make phone calls. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, some people are saying that it was just to taunt the girls, like, we know there's no reception here, go on and make the phone call, you little girl. But I don't think that was the case. Like, you don't take those risks, you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't do that. So I think actually after they get lost, they try to get help and survive for the first 5 days. I will be bringing in this infographic, the same with the phone logs, because this plays a big part in my theory. I think you can see the phone logs as well, right, man? So I just want to make sure that everyone else sees it. So yeah, so basically this theory goes that, okay, so they survive for the first 5 days, and as you can see, Chris's iPhone, Lisanne's Samsung phone, they're making normal phone calls for the first 5 days. Everything's smooth. Now look what happens on day 4. Lisanne's Samsung phone dies, which is normal. I don't think it's suspicious. It's normal. Day 5. Day 5, her phone dies on day 5. On day 5, Chris's iPhone is checking for signals. I believe that Kris is using her iPhone, and I believe Lisanne is using her Samsung on day 5. But look at this. Why did we not pay attention to this area? I don't know, it just hit me last night, it just hit me, this area right here. The 5th of April, guides start voluntarily searching around Boquete. So day 6, the next day after guides start voluntarily searching, the pin codes are not entered, and I don't believe that whoever was entering the pin codes were it was the girls trying to get reception. There was no point in doing that, because you don't even need to unlock the iPhone to call emergency. There's a button on the left hand side of the screen that you can't miss, and it says emergency phone call. You just press that and you try to call the emergency. You don't need to unlock the pin. I believe that on day 6 they're both potentially dead already. One of the guides, probably the shady guy that later on found the shorts, actually killed them. Or I see another explanation that Lisanne ran away and he managed to kill Kris only, and then Lisanne later on died in the jungle alone, or maybe she was found by the same guide and then later on killed. Now this would explain the no pin, the incorrect pin codes, because maybe the guide was already thinking, yo, I need to check these phones right now, maybe there's some incriminating information in there. Now you would think, why would the guide not just destroy the phones? Well, this will play a part still. So basically we have day 8, so I'm already assuming that the girls are dead at this point. We have day 8, 90 photos are being taken. Why would a guide or the natives or a mixture of these culprits, because the guides could have been working with the natives, why would they be taking 90 nighttime pictures? Well, it will all play out. I believe they took the pictures just to sort of make it seem that the girls were both still alive on day 8. You don't have a picture of Lisanne, because either they didn't want to take a picture of Lisanne after they killed her, or she's actually escaped somewhere. And that's how I would explain the bones being found in different locations. Maybe Lisanne ran away from the culprits, and she just died later on in a few days later or something like that. We have On April 11th, we also have no pins and then switched off after 1 hour and 5 minutes. I believe the guides or like the culprits sort of wanted to put this red herring in there that they were still alive on day 11, but that's when the phone stopped working, whatever. And yeah, so this begs the question, why would they not destroy the backpack? Why would they find the bones? Why would they find the shorts? Well, the answer to that is the 30 G's that was put up by the family, by the authorities. Because for the natives, the 30 grand, as I've said, makes you a rich person in the native world, you know what I'm saying? Because they don't have any money there. So they were thinking, let's preserve these items long enough for the the reward money being put out there. Then let's wait another month in advance. Let's give this backpack to a local woman that is sort of in on this whole thing, but she doesn't really know everything. But they just give her that backpack. Go to the police and get the 30 G's for us, okay? Because we're not gonna bring the backpack, you know what I'm saying? If I'm killing people out there and I want to return the backpack for money, I'm just gonna give it to someone else, like a local woman. Just go bring the money back to us real quick. So I think that's what happened there. So yeah, pretty much that's the explanations. The guides or a mixture of the natives, they actually goes in, they kill her, they kill the girls on day 6, I believe. They tried to open the phones with no success because they don't have the pin codes. The picture 509 that was deleted, I believe the culprits had deleted the picture because potentially somewhere, maybe on day 6, maybe late on day 5, the girls actually snapped a picture of one of the people involved in foul play, and they sort of, this can't be on the camera, let's delete this picture. And then a few days later they take a bunch of nighttime pictures, and what I'm saying, like they try to frame up the whole accident theory, but I think it's way too suspicious for it to be an accident. So yeah, my general consensus is that I believe the shady guide was involved and he had help from the natives, hence the woman who brought in the backpack for the reward money. So yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean, it certainly seems plausible. I think that theory covers a lot of the uncertainties that we've uncovered with some of the other theories in terms of like why this, why that. It sounds like sort of a disorganized kind of killing, not any kind of grand conspiracy, but what a lot of homicides turn out to be sometimes, which are just really stupid things that happen at the spur of the moment without a lot of planning and without a lot of forethought about what the consequences could be to anyone's life. And then when it comes to the reward, yeah, I mean, it very easily, like, you can see somebody getting cold feet when they, like, you see this. It seems so dumb, but I mean, we saw it in one of the other cases we covered, where the young lady had tried to kill her parents, and she had, for all of her plotting, she had never really thought about, like, do you think maybe the detectives are going to ask you questions for more than like an hour?
Yeah.
And which as soon as
Jennifer Pan.
yeah, Jennifer Pan, that whole conspiracy and plot fell apart under just some very simple, rudimentary police questioning from just like kind of a decent job done
Yeah.
by a police
Yeah.
detective. So it kind of goes to show you, like, we're not dealing with geniuses here.
Yeah.
And even when
Definitely.
yeah,
Bro,
especially in our case, but yeah.
I don't think like we're dealing with people who would take the pictures, like Photoshop the pictures, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
things like that.
yeah,
I don't think that
yeah.
was
It's
the
just not that
case.
level
It
of
was messy.
planning.
I think this whole thing was messy. They did a messy job here. I think it's just about time for us to wrap up, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know, man. We just hit 1,000 subscribers. Anything you want to mention to our audience before we sign out?
Thank you for all the great feedback. I mean, I'm just, like I said, my expectations have been vastly exceeded by the reaction and the participation and the really wonderful comments and feedback and advice, and yes, even the corrections. I think maybe especially the corrections, because we don't want to be wrong. We don't want to spread misinformation. We're about the truth on this show. So, you know, like we're adults. We can accept criticism and we can accept things that make our show better. So, we're really happy. I think case in point, this episode was greatly enhanced directly from the user comments, and pretty much a lot of what we talked about tonight came directly from the user comments that we got, which is what steered us to the different theories that we researched. I mean, the first episode we did in this topic was by far, I mean, by a factor of like 4 or 5x, the most commented episode we'd ever had. And all those episodes were people that were very interested in the topic, but also had really good suggestions of what to look at. So, thank you. And, we think the show is going to grow even faster, which, only helps us bring you better topics, better research, and a better show.
Exactly, guys. Thank you a lot for the milestone, and yeah, pretty much we'll be signing out now. For any other information that you want to share with us, definitely leave that in the comments section. I have a sneaking suspicion we might be coming back eventually to this case, definitely not next week. We have something else I think planned already. I also want to take a little break from this case. It's a really, like, you could just keep digging and digging here, but then I just feel happy that we have this sort of more structured, a better put thing than episode 56, which was just a not that great of an episode in my opinion. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And yeah, guys, stay safe and catch us on the next week's episode. Peace out.